We love where we live. Aroha kauana mātou ki te kāinga. Lots of clean, fresh water, a healthy moana, unique plants and animals, some of which aren't found anywhere else. A region that's adaptable and resilient to challenges like climate change, well-connected communities, and is developing with nature in mind. That's why we care for our place, the mighty Waikato. And we know you care about your place too. We love where we live. Aroha kauana mātou ki te kāinga. Lots of clean, fresh water, a healthy moana, unique plants and animals, some of which aren't found anywhere else. A region that's adaptable and resilient to challenges like climate change, well-connected communities, and is developing with nature in mind. That's why we care for our place, the mighty Waikato. And we know you care about your place too. Make your Waikato even better with us. Tō Waikato, kia wana.
Does it move now?
Oh, right.
So kia ora, councillors. We will reconvene our annual plan hearings meeting. It is 12:34 and we are now back in our chambers here in Hamilton. So we've got a few more submitters in front of us today, councillors, and our first one up is Hamilton City Council, and we have Deputy Mayor Angela O'Leary and Martin Parks.
Kia ora, thank you very much. Tēnā koutou everyone, tēnā koe Chair Pamela elected members, ko Angela O'Leary aho. Thank you for having us this afternoon and the opportunity to present our Hamilton City Council submission on your annual plan today. To my right, I'm joined by Mr. Martin Parks, Hamilton City Council's Urban Mobility Manager. So look, I'll just get right into it. I know we've got 10 minutes and if there are any questions, I'll leave plenty of time. Hamilton City Council supports the Regional Council's efforts to simplify the rating system for public transport, and we acknowledge the steps taken to engage with Hamilton City Council early with our elected members and our staff through the process, and we particularly thank you for visiting Hamilton City Council and holding a workshop on this process. It was robust engagement and we appreciate that. We also acknowledge your goal of creating a fair and regionally consistent system, something that we support in principle, provided that it reflects real equity for Hamiltonians, and that's the reflection of our submission this morning. So we want to, Hamilton City Council supports option 2, the capital value rating in Hamilton, as this maintains the current Hamilton rating method which is based on capital value. The approach works really well for Hamilton and we believe it's our fairest option, and that is the basis of the submission. As you well know, those with higher value properties contribute more, and those with lower value properties are protected from disproportionate increases under a capital value rating system. This also aligns with your intent in your annual plan to reflect the level of service available, and Hamilton has, of course, by far the most extensive bus network service. So we acknowledge that both systems will result in the same revenue collection. However, again, we support option 2. The reasons we oppose option 1 I've already reflected on, but we do understand that the Regional Council's preference is for simplicity, and we understand that. But a flat per property rate isn't equitable for Hamilton ratepayers. As you will also know, a uniform charge hits lower value properties hardest. Option 2, our preferred option, is fairer, and it is what good system design looks like, and this is the basis of our submission. We also want to keep equity and mode shift in our line of sight. We all want, and you join us as a regional partner in wanting better mode shift outcomes and fairer access to services, but equity matters in how those services are funded. The capital value model is the thing that better aligns, in our view, to fairness, equity and affordability. We also, in our submission, reiterate our call for a dedicated community and business liaison role. We feel very strongly that engagement drives use and use drives success, and that's what we all want for our PT network. So just with that, that was short and sweet and hopefully very clear. We support and we request option 2. We commend you for looking at regional consistency, and we know that a lot of work has gone into this particular issue, and it's been talked about for many years around this table, of which I have had the honour and privilege of being part of those conversations through my portfolio with Hamilton City Council. So again, the basis of our submission is a request for a fair and equitable rating system, so we would urge you and request that you adopt option 2. We thank you for our continued strong working relationship with yourself, Chair Pam, and your elected members and your staff. And if there are any questions, we are happy to take them now. But I'm sure this gentleman to my right will be the question, the answerer. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Ngā
Thank
mihi.
you for that. So I've got Councillor Smith, Councillor Nicol, and Councillor Hughes. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. I'll be straight to the point. You've used the word equity a number of times, as have our staff in their report to As based on the proposed changes, option 1, on a 250k property, it'd be an increase of $3.96 a week, approximately. 500k house, $22.57 a week, and a 750k house, $1.28 a week. To me, that's not significant. So when you talk about equity, as it's a service that's provided to all Hamilton residents, how can you say it's equitable when I'm assuming that you're perpetuating the nonsense that it proliferates, that higher value houses have wealthier occupants. So coming back to the word equity, can you explain what you mean by equitable? Because it doesn't seem to equate to equity.
Sorry, Councillor, there was a lot in that. Can you just define exactly what your question is?
Yeah, I did. How can you define equity? You've used the word equitable a number of times. I'm at a loss to understand what's equitable about having capital value rating.
What's equitable about having capital value rating is that the those in a higher value home in a higher capital property will equitably pay more than those in a lower value home.
And that's assuming that people in a higher value house have higher wealth.
Well, I'm not making an assumption.
Well, that's okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you. I was curious how Hamilton City Council rates for things like library or the swimming pools, for example. Is that done by a flat fee, or is that generally done by general rate and CV?
That's all done by our general rate, which is kept based on capital value. So
Thank you. That's really useful. And last question would be, do you find that, would you agree that higher value properties generally may have more occupants in them? It's just something that came up in some of the other submissions. I just wondered whether you had any comment.
I don't think I'm in a position to answer that. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Angela.
Welcome.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, did the Hamilton City Council councillors vote on this issue? And
Yes, they did.
What was the result?
We did. On the 30th of April, the draft submission came to Council as this position for option 2.
Can you tell me what the numbers were?
No, I don't have that with me.
I understand that it was a very close call.
Well, look, as I said, I don't have that with me. Obviously, it was the
Thank you.
majority.
Thank you. I find, similar to my learned colleague on the other side of the table, I found your presentation was a contradiction. On one hand, you're talking about simplicity, and yet you're advocating for a system which is far more complex to implement. And which means complex means money, cost, and so I cannot support it on that basis. So, the system was designed, everybody else.
Do you have any other questions?
Point of order, Madam
Yeah, do you
Chair.
have any other questions?
Well, that's it.
This is
Thank you.
questions and points of clarification.
Yeah, we're not in a
That's what
position
we're,
to decide whether we
that's what
agree
we're
with it or
talking
not.
about here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Strange.
Thank you for coming in today and for your presentation. Just had a question around, you mentioned that currently Hamilton is rated by CV from us. And so in your council's opinion, switching from currently CV to per property, given the rates increases that Hamilton ratepayers are facing, how do you view that sort of jump from CV to per property? What sort of effect would that have on Hamilton residents?
Do you mean our current rate rise?
Yeah, just generally thinking about, cost of living crisis, rate rises in general, no specifics.
Yeah.
For some properties to then face maybe a double rates rise from us
Yeah.
in this targeted rate.
Okay, yeah, no, fully understand that. Look, it's tough times. We all know that. It's tough times out there for our residents, and that's one of the bases of the submission and keeping it to CV. Where Hamilton City Council faces 2 more years of 15% increases, so any small amount added on has an impact. And while I can't speak for each individual resident in the city, I am here representing them, and I mean, capital value is more equitable and will not unfairly target those in lower value homes and in lower value properties that are possibly the least able to manage and take these financial increases.
Thank you.
Great. And
I have one
yes,
question, please.
yes, Councillor Smith.
In our reports here, it tells us that 59% of Hamilton residents who have submitted have favoured option 1. Have you got a response to why the majority of the residents who have chosen to respond would select option 1 and why we should support the council with option 2?
Well, no, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
You'd have to ask the
Dunbar.
submitters.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yeah, Councillor Lilly.
Thank
You're here encouraging resourcing a business community in liaison role. Is that something that Hamilton City would fully or partly co-fund?
I'll pass that over to my colleague Martin Parts to answer that one.
I think this is an encouragement rather than necessarily a support funding from Hamilton City Council position.
What do you see that role would actually achieve?
I think to work in conjunction with us to improve the opportunities for people to use public transport across the city, certainly the Hamilton City, but obviously it benefits the wider region as well.
Do you feel there's a lack in what we're doing at the moment?
I think currently we have a very collaborative, great working relationship, but I think it's one that if we get, say, the new services running that we want to see maybe in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, that's an opportunity to go one step further. You know, the more people we've got on public transport, the better our city's going to be running efficiently.
Great, thank you very much for that. Thanks, Deputy Mayor O'Leary. Appreciate your presence here today. Thank you, Martin, for helping us to understand a little bit more about the proposals that you have submitted on, and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
All right. So I'll invite our next submitters, but just a reminder to councillors that we are only asking points of clarification and questions of our submitters. This is not the place to debate the merit of anybody's particular submission. This is where we gain insight on our submitters' positions. Councillor Nebo, did you have a...
Well, I was going to suggest we just have a short recess to try and sort out the ground rules, Madam Chair, because we're sailing dangerously close to predetermination.
I think that I'm going to trust that that reminder that I have just given will serve councillors. So we do have our next submitters in the room. So I'll invite Mayor Jackie Church and Councillor Eugene Patterson from Waikato District Council to come forward. So this is submission 137 on your in your agenda. All right, so we've got 10 minutes. You can take your submission as read, but feel free to delve deeper into anything that you feel it's important for our councillors to hear ahead of this. We do have 10 minutes, so if you want to take questions from councillors, please allow for that within your presentation time.
Thank you, Chair Pamela, and to councillors. Thank you all for allowing us to come here today and submit on your annual plan. We have two points in our submission, and both of those are in support. So the first one is simply the simplified regional wide approach to public transport rating. And the other one is the new river and catchment management program for the Wharikawa Coast in Kaiawa. So, look, I'm not sure whether we need the whole 10 minutes because compliment and support, and especially I'd like to acknowledge the staff on both of those topics. They've worked extremely well and with our colleagues. So acknowledging the team on the side there with our colleagues around the transport models, and we did have a few. I wouldn't say hiccups, but a few hurdles to clarify and get understanding, so we can also communicate that with our communities. Then the second one was the support around the Wharikawa Coast, and we just want to also acknowledge and thank WRC staff for the target engagement in our northeastern communities of the district and within that whole catchment area, as well as the Hauraki district. So I can hand over to Mayor Jackie if there's any other comments, but they were the 2 points that we have. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Pamela and councillors for having us here today. Really appreciate, and as Councillor Eugene said, we really appreciate the effort you've gone into in the consultation, and the reconsideration of the processes as well. We appreciate that. Just to confirm from what our submission has said on the transport is that option 1 and 2 in the consultation document is what we are supporting, and we leave it to the Hamilton City Council to give feedback about the differences of those 2 options. And I guess we're any more information that you'd like from us, then we're happy to oblige. Open for any questions.
Are there any questions? I've got Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, we've heard from a couple of the Waikato Coast people this morning, but we've only had 8 submissions in total from the residents, of which 4 are in favour of option 2, which is rating everyone the same, or 2 are actually in favour of the other option. So do you have any, I notice you've carefully not indicated a preference. Do you have any indications of any particular preference, and or why you think we haven't had more feedback, given that we've had a lot of consultation?
Yeah, I probably couldn't. I'm not sure about the feedback as in consultation. I do know, if we're going talking about the transport options, the option 1 is our.
Sorry, this is Wharikawa Coast.
Oh, sorry, Wharikawa Coast.
Nothing to do with
Sorry, Wharikawa Coast. I am not too sure why there was a lack of submissions and that put in there.
You're open to either.
We're open to either of those 2 options. We haven't heard anything other than and what you have received. We are aware though that there was considerable consultation from staff in that area, and Waikato District staff that were aligned with some of those discussions thought the communication, consultation and engagement was very well done. So.
Yeah, I guess I'd also like to add, I think there was a little bit of confusion at some of the meetings where people sat. Well, I guess they forget where the rate spills come from sometimes and how important we all are to them, particularly when in that situation where it's Hauraki, ourselves and you, and where those public meetings were. And so I guess in the future to make sure we all collaborate as much. But I know that we had our councillor Peter Thompson at one of these meetings particularly. He didn't come away with any particular concerns around it. He felt that the consultations went well. And I don't see any in our LTP. We're going into our hearings tomorrow ourselves for LTP. So no, we've got no feedback for the Wharikawa Coast for us either. So can't help any more than that at the moment, sorry.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, and welcome to you both.
Thank you.
I appreciate the no preference stance that you've taken, which makes sense, allows us to focus on the community's input in that way. But being another large council, next to Hamilton City, along with Waipa, I suppose the question that we're grappling with of whether to go for a flat rate or by CV for this public service. Makes me want to ask you, in your experience in your council, things that are also public services like libraries and swimming pools, how do you rate for them? Is that done through general rate and CV based things, or do you have a flat rate? No, I'm just curious how things are done.
Sure.
In your council.
I'm going to take that back to the transport because that's relevant here. As an example, before you were proposal of that regional council, which I think is a good proposal to have the charges come from regional council for public transport. Ours was across the board, everybody paid the same rate, which was around, from memory, around $55, $56, under 60, between $50 and $60 per ratepayer. That's how we did our public transport. We do a lot of targeted rates through our community boards, and even some level of service ones in particular areas around playgrounds and tamahiri. So generally, other than our rate system, it's capital value, then everything else is a targeted rate. Our waters are all district-wide, whether you're next door to a wastewater treatment plant or the furthest away, they're all a district-wide. So generally,
and the libraries
we
and
do,
swimming
and the
pools?
libraries and swimming pools, their general rate.
Yeah.
General rate.
Yep.
Mhm.
General rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any flat rates? Because you obviously have some that are quite as high as, say, what we're getting close to $300 in Hamilton, but not. I realise it's a different location. But
Yeah. So
do they range generally in the lower, up to $50?
The highest target rate would be actually a debt one, which was at Port Waikato for a loan on that.
there was a loan on that. Yeah. So we do have a lot of targeted rates, flat rates. They are up and around. They can be around anywhere from $35 to $80, and then if you go across to waters and that, then they're significantly, they're $1,400, $1,500 targeted rate flat across the board for having that service. The options, Councillor Jen, is flat rate per property was the one that we supported the most. Hamilton City was having there, and I know that that's been discussed previous with Councillor O'Leary, that it's very different in the city where you've got properties of different values in the same street, very significant. We're a big, huge district, and a lot of our rural properties that have high values are not so much connected to the PT system. So having the flat per household rate, and we've done a lot of work on this with council WRC staff as well, is to have a set rate across the board instead of the CV rate, which is Hamilton's proposing.
No, appreciate that. Thank you. Very comprehensive. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Good to see you both again. The 1.6 million odd that you currently take from your general rate for public transport, have you been able to reflect that in your LTP so that the our joint ratepayers are not seeing double dipping?
We don't double dip.
We have done the very best we can in conveying that message to our communities, and continue to do so through not just through LTP consultation, but through community committees and boards. So it is difficult at times because people want to read what they want to read, and but we have done our very best to try to convey that there's no double dipping. It's just a transfer, and also there is increases in PT as well, so there is going to be that natural increase. So yeah.
And also, in our enhanced annual plan, because we're doing now year 2 of the LTP, as you're well aware now. So in an enhanced annual plan, we forecasted 6% as a GR, but the maths really being 4% minus 2%, we're actually been out at 4.25% because let's call it roughly the 2% was the regional council. So the maths are we're at 4.25% for our GR, which so we see we're going to be at, let's say, 4.
Right.
Yeah, and then that obviously those cost and level of service changes would be in the regional council, which we know that you've got a really good lens on costs and the need for service across the district and region.
Thank you so much for your submission, and thank you for coming into chambers today to speak to it. It's really appreciated, and I too just want to acknowledge the relationship that the region has with Waikato District Council. It's been really positive and productive, and long may that continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pamela and councillors, and wishing you well for the rest of the hearings and the deliberations.
Yeah, thank you so much for hearing us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we've got a 10-minute gap, and our next submitter is not due until 1:10. So we'll adjourn the meeting at 12:59. We'll reconvene in 10 minutes. All right, we will reconvene the meeting. It is 1:11. So we'll move on to our next submitters. This is submission number 133. The West Coast Coastal Community Catchment Group Incorporated. And we have Alistair Reeves and Lisa, if you come forward and take those two seats. So you have 10 minutes for your submission. We've got a timer that'll be on the screen, so you know the passage of the second hand. And if you want to allow time for questions from councillors, then you'll need to incorporate that within the 10 minutes, all right? You can take your submission as read, but feel free to elaborate on any particular points you would like to raise. Over to you.
Right, thank you for that. Well, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Marcroft and this is Alistair Reeves. And as the chair explained, we are the co-chairs of the West Waikato Coastal Catchment Group. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today to our submissions. I'm going to start with the public transport rating submission and Alistair will speak to the primary sector rates remission proposal. Our catchment covers 55,000 hectares from Te Akau south to just south of Port Waikato. The roads in our catchment are largely single lane, gravel and very windy. Although the distances might look small on a map, for many catching a bus would require a 30-minute drive on these 20 to 30-minute drive on these narrow windy roads and another 30 minutes on State Highway 22 and or Wainarro Road. Without major improvements to our roading, access to public transport by our community severely limits our use of public transport. For this reason, we believe the regional Waikato unserviced rate is significantly more appropriate for our catchment than the central Waikato unserviced rate. If I can ask you to look at your maps, what we propose is that the yellow be extended down from, say, Port Waikato, right down to at least Te Akau south. And it's hard to tell, but possibly 15, 20 kilometres, perhaps more inland from the coastline. Please, Council, will you consider this for us? I'm happy to host you all for a morning tea so you can see for yourselves the travelling times required. Contrary to our submission, we have no evidence to support the need of a shuttle bus service at this time. We sincerely apologise for this inclusion in our submission. We are a new organisation and some of our policies and processes are not yet as they should be. And this aspect of the submission was not put through our committee for approval. In summary, and further to our written submission on the public transport rating proposal, we strongly urge Council to extend the regional Waikato unserviced public transport rate to include all of the West Waikato coastal catchment area. And we do not have evidence of need for a shuttle bus service at this time. Thank you. Alistair will now speak to the primary industry rates remission proposal.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to our submission. The rate remission for the planting of native forests is something very much that the West Waikato coastal communities support. We see this rates remission as one way in which the WRC can support farmers. Landowners who have invested time, money in fencing and planting and restoring native lands should receive recognition for the significant investment in time and money. This rates remission is a very positive step by the WRC. So we support this proposal. But we do have some concerns. We have some reservations over the administrative costs of this policy on the Waikato Regional Council and hence ratepayers. And we wonder if there is a simpler solution to achieve WRC goals of more native plants on our whenua. The West Waikato Coastal Community has 170 members, over 55,000 hectares, and two clear objectives came out of our watershed meetings we held when we started. Our members wanted, one, to be able to plant more natives, and two, to get support to undertake farm plans. Considering what has been proposed by, one, the Commissioner for the Environment, Simon Upton, and two, the government, to support the uptake of industry-approved farm plans, we as a catchment would suggest that WRC, giving rates remissions for farm plans, will achieve more planting of native trees and far more improved environmental outcomes than just supporting planting natives. There's huge benefits to the WRC in accepting this proposal. There is no cost, as independent auditors are involved in carrying out these farm plans. There's a reduced need for backroom staff and WRC to administer farm plans, once again reducing costs. And I personally believe there'll be improved environmental outcomes for our whenua and land. To give you an example, there's 25,000 sheep and beef farmers in New Zealand, and 500 of them currently have a farm plan, which includes a freshwater farm plan. So there's a huge opportunity here to show some leadership. Thank you.
Right, I'll open it to councillors if there's any questions. Councillor Kneebone.
Hey, thanks, Alistair. Hey, just trying to get an understanding of when you say rates remissions for farm plans, you mean you're suggesting the council, for example, would but the cost of the farm, the cost of building, creating the farm plan, suggesting?
Probably support the farmer in that if they could come up with an industry approved farm plan and give that to the Waikato Regional Council, I believe that should come at some, whether it's a remission, I appreciate there's a cost in farm plans around the likes of overseer and whether that's a opportunity once again for the council to make that available at no cost to the farmer. So it's trying to provide positive incentives really around those farm plans because they do come at a cost, but I think they have a huge environmental benefit to everyone involved.
Okay, no, I think I understand where you're going. Probably something you need to flesh out at yeah, no, thank you.
Councillor Mahuta.
Kia ora. Firstly, thank you for establishing an advocacy group for the area. It's been a long time coming. I'm from Huntly, well, the other side of Huntly West. I understand what's happening out Glen Murray just by relations. My question is related to transport. Traditionally, the area has kind of been half in education and health, half in Auckland and half in the Waikato for the purposes of those agencies. Is that still the case? Because it would impact the transport services provided in terms of education and stuff. I'm not sure if it's still the same, but your area used to fit squarely between planning districts in education and in health. Is that still the case? I know it's one council area, but in terms of education funding, it would be.
I personally don't think we've got the answer for that one, but we could do some research on that.
I know we could too. I just wondered if that's one of the reasons why, because sometimes the funding for education comes through that vehicle. So if we could follow it up through the Transport Committee, because it's one of those traditional areas in our region where you're kind of a little bit funded out of Auckland, a little bit funded out of the Waikato. So I wouldn't want to make it harder for you.
Thank you.
Or more complicated. Thank you very much.
Like the sound of that.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, something Councillor Nebo were just looking at in terms of the maps. You're actually suggesting a redraw of the map so that almost from Huntley out into that seaward side, given it's rural, does not fit into the current coloured blue area. It becomes orange. Is that correct? And do they have our staff aware of that when we've had discussions? What your proposal is?
So yes, that's correct. I believe, or we believe, sorry, the catchment believes that this should be at least yellow down to Raglan. And if I was a Raglan South resident, I would be taking it all the way down.
Great.
Sorry, we can only really speak on behalf of our catchment, but I'm sure that there are other communities that would, that's right.
Great. Thank you very much for your submission. Thank you for putting in a submission, and thank you for showing up today to speak to it. It's really important to take these opportunities to share your thoughts with councillors on what's best for your communities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora. All right. All right, I'm going to invite our next submitters forward. This is submission 125 for Rangatahi Voices. And who do we have speaking?
Yes, hello. My name is Janet. I've been with Rangatahi Voices.
Janet?
Janet, yeah.
Janet?
And this is Daniel.
Janet and Daniel. So Janet and Daniel, again, I don't know if you heard before, but we have a 10-minute clock on the screen so you can see as the time passes. You can assume that we have read your submission and take the time to highlight some particular areas you'd like councillors to really focus in on. If you want to allow time for councillors to ask questions, you just need to allow for that in the 10 minutes. All right, over to you.
Yes, so hello, my name is Janet, and this is Daniel. We're here on behalf of Rangatahi Voices, which is a youth forum part of under the Regional Council. We meet every fortnightly to discuss issues relevant to youth and advocate for a youth voice in the region. So yes, my name is Janet. I'm from the first year student studying law at University of Waikato, and Daniel introduces.
My name's Daniel. I live out in Gordonton, so extended Waikato area, and I'm a final year 13 student at St. Paul's Collegiate School.
Cool. We wanted to focus our oral submission on the transport services section specifically. We acknowledge that youth is the demographic that benefits serviced use the transport system the most. Particularly university students and those in high schools. So I guess having a youth perspective on this topic here is probably very beneficial for both the youth and for the council itself. And we had a discussion over at one of our conferences, and the team decided that we prefer option 1 for particular reasons, and I believe that's the option that council prefers as well. We believe that it is fairer to charge all households the same rate, no matter their property value of the house. We think that even if there is a house who, their capital value is higher, they may not use the transport as much as those who are have a less property value on their house. So having a standard fare is what we agree with the most.
Yeah, and we recognise that it's a good thing, obviously, to have people using buses because there's less congestion and it's better for the environment. But within this scenario, we believe that the fairness of reflecting these rates outweighs these considerations, particularly in recognising that people will use buses if they're cheaper, but the cost of providing buses needs to be reflected in the prices that people are willing to pay within these buses. And to that extent, if these subsidies are contributed more by people who are less likely to use buses, which in this case, if you have higher land value, higher house value, you are just less likely to use buses. If by that option they pay more and don't end up using the buses, it's just not fair. And we, as Rangatahi Voices, don't believe that we should approach it like that.
Yeah. So we've taken a more of a fairness approach in this and saying that, yeah, everyone should pay the same rate for riding the buses.
Yeah. And as youth, we'd love to have more buses available running more often as possible, so we can, just get on a bus and go where we want, when we want. But we realize that it does need to be also a sustainability factor, and not just environmentally, but also economically sustainable and fair to all the residents within the Waikato area.
Yeah, we also considered the option of having either flexi buses or like a mixture between buses and cars to run more frequently. There was some discussion on that. Yeah, we did consider that option, and I think that most of us did like that idea if it was possible to implement. But yeah, I think that's kind of our main perspective on issue of transport.
And to that extent, a lot of youth, particularly youth under 16, who can't drive themselves or just don't have simple access to cars, buses do provide a sustainable option, and just keeping the rates lower and more accessible and having more options. So one thing that we did talk about was if buses were smaller and could run more frequently, this would work better, kind of like what we're currently doing with Flex, because at the current time, when the buses are larger and they might be, during off hours, just more vacant, it's like running a huge car for just a handful of people. And, it's a tough one because obviously you have to have enough transport on peak hours to sustain the population, to sustain the peak during hours. But then during the off hours, for youth under 16, particularly like during weekends or in off days, having these smaller buses and just more flexible options might be more suited to youth, and who are just the primary demographic for these buses.
Yeah, we just think it's a lot more sustainable economically and environmentally to have in less peak hours, having smaller, perhaps flexi buses running during those hours.
Thank you.
Nice. Any other points you'd like to raise?
I think that's our main points.
We have a Councillor Nibon. Oh, sorry. Wait a minute. Sorry, Councillor Nibon. I did not have my order right. I've got Councillor Hughes, Councillor Graff, then Councillor Nibon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming in. I'm absolutely delighted to hear young people talking about alternative ways that we may be able to model our transport system. And I can only encourage you, when you're in your group, to come back to us at some stage with your thoughts and ideas. I know you presented them today and in your submission, but I'd like you to have a think about a possible Uber-type community arrangement, where it's, you have to involve the community in it, but having an Uber-type arrangement where you can actually summon a vehicle, picks a group of people up, brings them where they want to go, takes them back home and drops them off at their doors. So I'm delighted. Thank you for coming in.
I think we actually have something like that at the university, where we do like carpool services, where if you're wanting to go to the university, there's this kind of like a website. And if it's sort of a similar region one, because parking is a big problem at the university. If you're there after 9 o'clock, good luck finding a park. But yeah, so is the carpool service. So I think that's working really well in the university kind of atmosphere. So that could be something to look at bringing the wider region as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Graff.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for coming in, Janet and Daniel, because just thinking about the affordability, is the amount you pay for fares, etc. Do you find that affordable, or do you think you could afford to pay more, or your friends and people that use public transport? What do you think their views are on affordability?
For me personally, as a university students, we get a subsidy on our rates, which is First of all, that's amazing, and it's really, really impacting the students wanting to use buses more, just because they're a lot more cheaper in transport and things like that. Yeah, I think a lot of my close friends and things, they all use buses and they have no problem paying for them, but of course, cheaper is always better. So, yeah, it's just that mix of the affordability of what the council can afford to charge for them, and then
Thank you.
Councillor Kneebone.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your submission. Just wondering if you had any thoughts on how to get more people generally using PT.
Right. Within this current situation, we realize that these buses operate only centrally within Hamilton. And so I think within the conversation is just having more accessibility and just better times and just having more options within like the extended Hamilton. Obviously, there's that economic viability of making sure that the buses are still full enough for them to be viable. But I think one thing particularly for like the further away regions is just looking at if there's a way to make them more flexible and also just to incorporate more people within the wider regions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Strange.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your submission and the time that you've put into it. Yeah, do appreciate your views as bus users as well, and your general support of PT and especially the flex buses that we run within Hamilton as well. And I just, not really a question, but more of a invitation that when we do the regional public transport plan next triennium, that'll be fantastic to have your thoughts reflected there as well. So yeah, and yeah, happy for you to engage with Transport Committee or the PT Committee. So yeah, thank you for your time and look forward to the future contributions. Thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Nicol. Councillor Mahuta.
Kia ora, thank you for your submission. I'm interested in, I guess, how the forum is getting information, how you're asking into council for the information and what economic analysis you're using. Because we're not asking you to consider the whole community, we're asking you to think about how any of our decisions impact your demographic specifically. And given that you're not ratepayers, but children of or beneficiaries of future rates, because that's a really useful view. Because we can talk to parents and ratepayers, but we don't know how it trickles down to your demographic group. So the one I've got in transport is transporting youth around the region is challenging, but one is, do you talk about safety and all the other things that make it usable within the forum?
Yes, so definitely safety is one factor, I think, within youth, within just the extended conversations of buses at night and just making sure that buses, you know, the parents also feel safe for children to go on buses, particularly like sometimes children under 16, we can't drive ourselves.
Yeah.
And so parents sometimes also won't have access to just private transportation. So then within public transportation, one conversation I think is just to make sure one conversation that comes up pretty frequently is just for nighttime transport to make sure that they're not only safe but also easily accessible to youth.
Thank you. And then just in terms of when you're considering the whole region, and especially things that touch our rural constituencies like farming, I appreciate that a lot of our forums are Hamilton based and that's who informs them. So how do we get more regionally generous and make sure that the view, how it impacts rural youth, can be part of what the forum considers?
So yeah,
it seems to me you don't have that information to be able to put a view down.
Yeah, so Rangatahi Voices, we have members from all over the Waikato. There's some of our members who drive hours to come attend meetings sometimes, or Zoom and things like that. So we have a very good perspective of across the Waikato. And when we mentioned, so we also do some submissions to like the Parliament and things like that, because we're always really, really interested in having our voice heard. So when the issue of transport or the question of transport came up, actually a lot of youth were very interested in having their perspective heard in the submission. So perhaps I think it's just a very good, so as terms of like where we get our information from, it's mostly just discussions of our perspectives on our youth.
I guess I'm trying
experience.
to understand, sorry, just from you, do we facilitate you well as a forum? Can you ask us for the information you require from council to inform your submission? Because it seems to me we have information you've not been accessing, and there's a forum that we are facilitating. Could you consider that? Thank you.
Yeah, and for that, I'd just like to extend a formal invitation to attend any of our sessions. We run them fortnightly, and perhaps Mesh would be a good contact to come in, and if you would, because we're always interested. We had lawyers come in and help us write submissions before. We're always wanting to get the best information possible. So if there's anything that we aren't accessing, I'd love for you to provide.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you both for coming in. Thank you for the forum, for putting the effort into writing a submission. It's really helpful for us, and we appreciate your view. As Councillor Mahuta says, it's a vital view in terms of the future-focused decisions that this council is making. So thank you for taking the time to come in today.
Thank you so much.
Right. Well done. Okay, we'll move on now. Do we have Maggie in the back? Kia ora, Maggie. So, councillors, we're now moving on to submission 119 and submission 131. This is Grace Maggie Wilcock. And so Maggie, we've got 10 minutes on the screen. You can assume that your submission has been read. Anything you want to highlight for us in particular? If you would like to take questions from councillors, you'll need to allow for that. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, my name's Maggie. I live in the southern area of Waikato, Tamahiri, where there's a trial bus en route at the moment, which is good. But why I've submitted is because submitting to the LTP 10-year plan, the annual plan that comes out does not seem to be reflecting a lot of the submissions that were made around perhaps council looking at what's nice to have but you can't afford. There doesn't seem to be much going on from that aspect of trimming council's budget. So I don't normally fill in the online one, so I apologise for this. I normally do them properly, and I was in a hurry. So I just wanted to go down to the fees and charges. Having had a quick look online, some of them seem a bit unreasonable from the point of view. And so one question would be, if I wanted a printout of a spatial map, would you be able to give me the cost before I committed myself to actually organising one, especially as when I try and go on the web, I can't even pull the spatial maps up when I'm trying to look at something that's an overview of an area as opposed to a specific property. Most of the research I do on behalf of a local group isn't about an individual property. It's about a general problem or an issue in the area where we need good information. We know it's there, but trying to access it is almost impossible. So, and the fees and charges for that looked quite high to me as a community group of volunteers. So, and the other thing that's cropped up is the duplication of councils working in silos. When an ecological report is available in one council and the other council needs the same ecological report, you should not be paying to have it done twice. You should be working in conjunction with other local councils and using the same report. The only other feedback that I had, which is on the UAGC, I went through the district plan, and at first it looked like you had it set at 9%, at which I was bemused. So I got in touch with council and I've got some figures, and I understand UAGC is set at 17%. I've not come across anything below 20% before. The ceiling is 30%. Councils are using user pays and targeted rates, but the majority of what council does is for the public good. We just heard the people saying everyone should pay the same fee for rates. Shouldn't be anything to do with the CV. If anything, it should be a head count, a tax per head, but we know what happens if you do that. So that UAGC needs to go up, and you need to look more carefully, in my opinion, at how you decide what's a public good, because virtually everything that this council does is a public good, whether it's environment or transport or water. The main essence of that is public good. Thank you.
Any questions?
No.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I was interested in your comment about duplication of ecological reports and wondered if you could point us to a real example rather than making a generic statement.
I thought someone might say that. I think they're called, it was probably done through WSP, that used to be Opus, and the report was done by Kinetic, and it was to do with the resource consent for the work in the Tamaheri Gully system, where there is a proposed aspirational walkway that's been in existence for the 1990s. And during that time, there's been a lot of work done, but the most recent one is the Kinetic one, and then someone else had to go and get another one. Well, the two councils seem to be working in separation as opposed to working and cooperating together. We can see the cooperation that might happen over water between different councils, but I don't think it goes far enough. I think councils need to be working more beside each other. Even if you identify your ecological group, they have a project team and you have a database that picks up these things, or you talk to each other. It does seem to me there's silo stuff going on quite a lot.
Yeah, I'd like to take that offline. I think I know the background to what you're talking around. I think what is important to recognise, though, is that the regulatory agency, the consenting agency for some of the work that's going on in Tamaheri Gullies is actually the Regional Council, and there is a requirement for certain pieces of information to be available before work can start. And I think there may be some confusion around the role of the Regional Council versus the District Council and what their requirements are.
No, I'm fully aware of the RMA and the government legislation and what's required and what you require. I've looked at it and gone through it. I met the people doing the report in the gully, talked to them. I've read the whole document through, and what is required by one council for their purposes still doesn't mean that you have to do the whole study again because the other council has a slightly different viewpoint. You might ask someone to add an addendum, but you shouldn't have to do the whole report again. It's very costly to the ratepayer.
I accept what you're saying, but the main point I'm making is that the consenting requirement for one council is not the same as the other. By law, there are certain things that have to be done in a particular way. But I absolutely get your point about the degree of duplication, and perhaps we could talk about that sometime offline.
Right. Are there any other questions or points of clarification?
Peggy, you came in last year and gave us your opinion on the public transport issue.
I did.
Just I note on your submission 119, you prefer option 1. So that's what's on offer for Waikato District. You're obviously quite happy with how things have settled after last year's proposals?
Yes, I think so. It's working very well, and as I understand it, that because the Tamaheri bus system is a trial, that is still being funded, I believe, by Waikato. I'm sure I've got this right, Waikato District Council. Then if it's retained and becomes permanent, then it would go back to a service charge under Regional Council as opposed to the slightly lower unserviced rate as it is.
Yes.
It doesn't matter to me. I have a 50-minute walk to get to the bus, which isn't very practical, so I probably won't use it, but it's fair to do it like that.
Okay, no, I think you've got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, I'll thank you very much for coming in, Maggie. Thank you for your submissions. Thank you for your continued interest in providing input to Waikato Regional Council. It is always helpful and always welcome. Thank you.
Thank
for
you
your
very
time
much. Thank you,
today.
everybody. Thank you.
All right, our next submitter is online. We've got, so this is submission number 138, the Disabled Persons Assembly, New Zealand, and I understand we have Patty Poa online.
Kia ora.
Patty, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great, and we can hear you. So Patty, we've got 10 minutes on the clock. Hopefully you can see that from your end. So you can take your submission as read. Please feel free to highlight any particular items that you would like us to focus on. And if you want to allow time for councillors to ask questions, please do that within the 10 minutes.
Beautiful.
Over to you,
Thank
Patty.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa, ngō ngā pia hau, he uri hau o Ngāti Maniapoto me te Ngāti Tūwhare toa, ko Peripo tōku ingoa no reira kia ora mai tātou katoa. To the hearings chair and elected members, thank you for the opportunity to present on the annual plan. I'm here today, I'll just give you a bit of a background of Disabled Persons Assembly. We're a not-for-profit peer impairment organisation run by and for disabled people. We work on systemic change just to create an equitable society based on Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the Aotearoa New Zealand Disability Strategy, and I work as one of their policy advisors. First and foremost, I just wanted to pass on thanks to the Waikato Regional staff, civil defence and local community members for their support and continued recovery efforts after Cyclone Tam. We also wanted to applaud you on the Bus It Free Fare scheme for our disabled community, because disabled bus users, just their lives have been transformed from it, and also they commented on the full rollout of the accessibility cards, which has just been amazing for our community. Unfortunately, one of our local Waikato DPA members was going to speak, but she has just returned from a huge kaupapa for our Māori disability community and is unable to join today, so it's just me. I'm again assuming you've all read it, so I just wanted to focus on a few key areas. One of them is public transport, which is very important for our disabled community. We did note that Regional Council and Community of Waikato are working together to develop the different accessible community transport solutions. And we just wanted to again reiterate, we know a lot of the rates increases are going to be around investing in public transport. So we wanted to just again highlight the importance it is for disabled to live independent lives, and for that the necessity of an accessible public transport system. So I just wanted to highlight that importance of public transport, but also to highlight the need for disability. I know most councils have a disability advisory group, but the importance of listening to those voices, because what often happens is people focus on one section of what's accessible, but not the whole of journey approach, which is having access to the bus shelters, having access to get to the bus shelters. So it's a whole of journey approach. So one of the things we do regularly ask is the inclusion of disabled people's organisations, your own disability community, in the actual discussion. And one of the specific recommendations we did want to make is having one of the Waikato disability community having a seat on the Regional Transport Committee, because it's in those places that we can be an integral part of making decisions. One of the things we talk about is what we call whole of journey approach and the accessible journey. And what I like sharing is an example, just so people can get an idea of what that looks like. So our example was Moana is a wheelchair user going out to run a few errands. Moana wants to visit a public service. She's waiting for her modified car funding, and her support driver can't drive her there, so she has to use a wheelchair to go out. On the way, they find someone has left an e-scooter across the walkway. So Moana is forced to go onto the road to get around it. And Moana gets halfway to town and finds a curb corner is being repaired. So has to consider their wheelchair battery life and finding an alternative route or risk going onto a dangerous road. So that's what we're considering when we're talking about whole of journey approach and the importance of including disabled voice, because sometimes one aspect takes away from the whole journey that a disabled person has to deal with. Briefly, I wanted to talk a little bit about climate change and emergency management. I know that there currently Waikato Emergency Management is working with Regional Council around this, and we've just recently recovered from Cyclone Tam. We just asked that, again, disabled are included in those conversations and that collaboration between Council and Waikato Emergency Management. And because we're the most at risk, I mean, in terms of being at risk, we're the ones, it's harder to find accessible housing for us. Some of the actual evacuation places aren't accessible. There were stories of people who weren't evacuated during the flooding and people rescuing them and the water was to their neck because they couldn't escape. So it's these things that we're the most at risk during these emergencies. So I know that Council works with emergency management, but it's considering we need to have our voice, not just with emergency management plans, but with climate adaptation policies. So that's one thing we would like to actually raise and highlight, because it's quite important. And one, I think the final thing, ka huri ahau ki ngā tangata whaikaha Māori. I turn to Māori disabled as both tangata whenua and mana whenua. And I am tangata whenua, I'm not mana whenua of Waikato. So we just wanted to acknowledge our Māori disabled whānau, which is why I would have really appreciated Helena, who is Māori disabled and lives in Waikato. But one of the things we noted is there is a lot of Māori organisations that work with Council, and one of those was Tairanga Whenua. So again, that interweaving of tangata whaikaha Māori into those conversations, because they provide the aspect of not just being tangata whenua, mana whenua, but also in terms of being whānau haua, which is Māori disabled in connection with our iwi, hapu and whānau. So we just wanted to offer that opportunity just to enrich the perspectives of that rōpū. And I conclude with a final ask that Council continue to involve disabled people and tangata whaikaha no aspects of planning and discussion. In other words, nothing about us without us. So, Chair, we're now open to questions from the panel regarding the submission.
Thank you for that, Patty. Much appreciated. We've got a question from Councillor Nicol.
Kia ora. I recall initiating a conversation after the long-term plan submission, because I saw your comments in that one about climate linked. And so I recall a Zoom call with about 5 or 6 people, may as well as been yourself as well. And we talked about the fact that you have an MOU with a number of councils. Do you, and I was wondering whether, how many of those you have, or whether any progress had been made with Waikato Regional Council in setting up an MOU.
I'll need to get back to you with that info because I wasn't actually a part of that meeting. So I'll check to see if there is so you mentioned a memorandum of understanding with Waikato Regional Council?
So my understanding was that Disabled Persons Assembly has a memorandum of understanding with a number of councils across the country. And that then outlines the kind of relationship and when engagement happens and that type of thing. And that there was a desire to seek one with Waikato Regional Council. So if that desire still exists, I'd be keen to know where that process is at. Thanks.
I will actually check up on that with our Chief Executive, Mojo. So
yes, she was on the call.
Oh, great. Yes,
Awesome.
I will follow up with her on that because, again, it's been quite, yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
And I'll get back to you on that.
Right, we have another question from Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, I note in your submission that Waikato Regional Council was the first to implement the 100% accessibility. Have any other councils adopted it since?
No, but we do regularly use your example when we're addressing the other councils. Yeah, definitely. It's just the stories back from our Waikato disabled community just talk about how much more freedom it gives them to actually, because here in Northland, a lot of our public transport services are not accessible either. So, except for Whangarei. Whangarei is the only area. So we do use you as an example of how it should be.
Right. Thank you for that. We love it when people uphold the work we do nationwide. I think that's fantastic, and thank you for doing that. Oh, Councillor Mahuta.
Nei anō te mahi ki a koe pēti mo te hunga haua e kawea mai nei koe tō rātai reo, so thank you. Just by connectedness, thank you for speaking into the matters that most directly impact the people you're advocating for. I'm just mindful, we just heard from the Rangatahi Futures Committee of Council, and there's probably room for that group to be grown in terms of their knowledge around disabilities and speaking with communities with mixed ability me key. So please, on behalf of, just forward your advocacy to seeking rangatahi membership in that committee, because they've got probably more capacity to grow the future view around inclusive settings and things like that. So hewe, hei koha ki a koutou, kia ora.
Oh, ngā mihi tō koha ne.
Hey, thank you very much, Patty. Thank you for your submission. Thank you for appearing before Council today to speak to that submission. It is very much appreciated.
Ngā mihi nunui.
Great. All right. Now, councillors, we do have our final 2 submitters either in the room or online. So with everybody's indulgence, can we just continue on? Yes? All right. Okay, so we'll go forward to submission 124. That's Phil Janot. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. You probably heard the rundown before. You've got 10 minutes, and if you want to allow time for questions, please accommodate that within the 10. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors. My submission is around the rating proposal which relates to the public transport. In the original proposal, it was stated that the public transport system was defined as a public good. I hate to tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't. It is very much a private good. And the people who benefit from that are the people who use the buses. The document also commented on other aspects such as reducing congestion, improving road safety, reducing carbon emissions, and giving businesses access to a wider pool of workers. Incidentally, the latter is not a public good either. It's absolutely a private good. Now, I don't know how many of you drive around Hamilton at 8 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night. The impact of the buses on congestion is absolutely nil. And given that most of the buses are largely empty most of the time, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per passenger mile is actually in excess of what it would be if those individuals were driving their own vehicle. So as such, I oppose the rating proposal as it stands. I think that what the council needs to do is look at rationalising the bus service to make it much more efficient. And it's getting, the cost is getting to the point where ratepayers can no longer afford it. I do have a question for the council. I was fascinated to find that I was living in an unserviced part of central Waikato, whereas a colleague who lives a few kilometres down the road is in the unserviced part of regional Waikato, and yet I'm paying 3 times more than he is. And the question is, why? What is the rationale for that? No stage in any of the documentation has the council given any rationale as to the standing or the logic, if you like, behind the rating proposal. And it certainly didn't give any rationale as to why I should pay 3 times more than somebody that lives 3 kilometres down the road. So yeah, to finish off, my recommendation to the council is that the proposal as it stands is scrapped. You guys start looking at something that rationalises the whole system. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Got it. Any questions? Councillor Kneebone.
Afternoon, Phil.
Thanks.
A couple of questions. First one is just to clarify, are you saying, is it your view that buses per se don't ease congestion, or the way we're doing it's not easing congestion?
Both. I mean, buses would ease congestion if they were running fully loaded most of the time.
So I guess the follow on from you talked about, I think you used the term we need to rationalise the way we do it. What does that look like? And I know we've only got a few minutes, but in a nutshell.
Well, one of my observations from driving around Hamilton for the last 38 years is that bus service use 40, 45-seater buses, which, as I say, usually have between 4 and 6 people in them. One of the first steps I would suggest is you start looking at smaller vehicles. Now, you may need some bigger buses at some time in terms of peak periods, but most of the time they're empty and they cost a bloody fortune to run.
Okay, and any thoughts on how we transition from obviously trying to get behavioural change, because clearly if no matter what bus we put on, we're never going to fill it up on the first day, sort of thing. How we sort of transition into the ideal world, which I think we probably all want.
Well, I think I would admit that's a tricky exercise. Most people don't use buses because they're not convenient in terms of travel and where they go to. I mean, most bus services, and Hamilton's the same, it's a wheel and spoke type exercise. So you have to do a lot of extra travelling to get where you want to, which is why most people use cars, because they're much more convenient.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Strange. Just I suppose a question from me. So the other day we celebrated the 1 millionth passenger on the Meteor bus that was introduced. I'm trying to think when this triennium, so within the last year and a half, maybe. So 1 million passengers. So is your contention that if all 1 million of those passengers had been in a car, it would have been the same impact on congestion on the roads?
Depends on what period are we talking about.
Since, you mean, how long has it taken to reach 1 million passengers? Yes. So let's say, I don't know when the Meteor started. August 23. So 1 million passengers since August 23. So about a year and a half, let's say.
basing my observations, travelling through Hamilton at 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock, the buses are having no impact. Mind you, we have a shocking roading system and a total lack of synchronisation of traffic lights, which don't help, but that's another story altogether.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Phil, for your submission. Something I've taken from it is, because you mentioned the hub and spoke model, and our regional public transport plan that was updated about 3 years ago talked a lot about moving from coverage, which is where you end up with a lot of empty buses, to ridership, which is where we end up with a lot of good patronage, really good patronage. And it's a formula that's worked, we've seen now quite a few times. Just wanted to encourage you that when the regional public transport plan gets up for review again next year, to make a submission to that. But what I'm taking from it is, I think we are on a trajectory of moving from coverage to ridership, and we should really challenge ourselves on the pace of that, because it leads to those good results. Thank you for your submission.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much, Phil, for, yes?
Sorry, Madam
Yes.
Chair, I posed a question. I would like a answer if that's possible. As to why I'm paying 3 times more than somebody that lives 3 kilometres down the road.
I would have to defer to our.
Normally we provide the answers following the hearings.
All right.
Yeah, because, yeah.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you very much for taking the time to put in a submission, and thank you for taking the time to come in and speak to it. It's very helpful. Kia ora. All right. So for our last submission today, this is submission number 78. We have John Lawson. John, I do see you online there. So you're on mute, John. Sorry, we have come back a bit early, so hopefully, let's see, we had John scheduled for 2:20. So we are a bit early. So we might just, we'll just adjourn, councillors, and we'll try and send a message to John, and yeah, we'll just take a few minutes break, all right? So meeting adjourned 2:08.
Sorry, I've now found the microphone.
Sorry, John, did I hear you?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I've now found where the microphone
Sorry,
control is.
John, we had just adjourned the meeting because I wasn't sure if you were there. So we'll just, if you can just hang tight with us for a bit. A few councillors have just exited the room. I'll let you know when we're calling the meeting back to order, but it will definitely be within the next 5 minutes. All right?
Yep, fine.
Kia ora. All right, councillors, we will reconvene the meeting. It is 2:18. And we have our next submission is submission 78. And that is John Lawson, who is sitting out in sunny Ragland, I'm guessing.
Correct. Kia tate. Yeah, I'm following really on the heels of the previous speaker, who was curious as to how you'd reached your decision to charge us a range of amounts for public transport, because some people are going to be paying $11.50 and some are going to be paying $278.88. And it seems to me that we're all getting much the same benefit because most people don't use the bus, as he was pointing out. And also looking at the figures, the particular issue that you're looking at is whether people in Hamilton should be charged on the basis of their property value or a per capita amount. And since 74% of the properties in Hamilton are worth less than the million or so of the median value, it seems to me that a lot of people are going to be paying rather more than maybe is fair, considering this is supposed to be based on fairness, amongst other things. I also look at the way that you've apportioned charges for the Wharakawa Coast drainage scheme, and that the region, the rest of us in the region are paying 30% of that cost. And I can't find any figures as to what the proportion of public transport is, but it looks as though 30% is probably not what is being paid by those in the further regions as compared with those in Hamilton, because there's a lot more people paying that 278 in Hamilton than paying the 1150 in the far corners of the region. But of course, over 98% of journeys in Waikato aren't made by bus. So the reality is that, as the previous speaker was saying, most people don't get any particular benefit from the buses. But I do note that in your agenda, it says providing efficient and effective public transport is an important step to enabling transport emissions reduction, which is true, but it's an important step, but it hasn't actually been taken, as some of the questioning and answers in the previous session have established. Because in particular, I'm concerned that we're being charged that amount of 76.69 in Raglan, which is the same as the amount that's being charged for those with a much better bus service like Cambridge or Te Uamutu. And it seems to me that if we had the same bus service, we'd have a lot more passengers, because before the changes were made, if you look back at the first quarter of 2024, Raglan at that time had 22,800 passengers, Cambridge 2,500 less, and Te Uamutu 300 more. Sorry, my maths is that wrong there. 230 more. But the changes now are showing that there's big increases in the numbers of people using the Cambridge and Te Uamutu buses now that they're running hourly and now that they're using electric vehicles. And it also seems to me that we're missing out here in Raglan, because you look at our permanent population, which is a bit less than 4,000, whereas during the summer, the daytime population is probably well over 20,000. So it's comparable with the towns which have got an hourly bus service. And if we're going to be paying the same rates as those towns, then it seems to me that we ought to be getting the same service. It's also the seems to be an odd issue where you're looking at what you're calling unserviced areas, and they're paying half the rates, whereas some of the unserviced areas like Tamahere and Whatawhata, in fact, have the same bus service as the other areas, which are paying twice as much. And it also seems to me that if that's going to continue, then maybe the buses don't need to stop at places like Tamahere and Whatawhata, but could just run express and probably save about 5 minutes each way on their journeys. And the other issue which I wanted to mention was the amounts that are being paid by ratepayers for, in the case of Raglan, we've got a whole series of roundabouts which are being planned by the district council, looking to pay about $500,000 or more each, whereas the cost of the Raglan Hamilton bus at the moment this year is $141,000, which could be paid for many times over with even the cheapest of those roundabouts. So I'm just wondering whether it's possible to take account of the fact that ratepayers are subsidising cars rather more than they're subsidising buses, despite that statement in your agenda about the effect on emissions reduction. And of course, you've also got a submission from Tiako just to the north of Raglan, which correctly point out that they have no buses in that area, and yet they're paying $38.35 to have no buses, whereas Te Araha, which has a few buses, pays $12 less, $26.84. I just wonder whether these represent fairness. So essentially, that's my submission. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? I suppose a question that I've got, John, is are you familiar with the total mobility and the community transport being proposed to be included in the package that is delivered through this public transport rate?
I don't know all the detail, but I'm certainly aware of those services and that there are changes being made. So those seem good. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
As indeed does restoring bikes on buses. So thank you very much for that email too.
Yes, yes, fantastic. Any questions? No? Hey, thank you very much, John, for the effort you put into putting together your submission and taking the time to appear before council today. I know you always take a very interested view in what happens at your local councils, and certainly from Waikato Regional Council's point of view, we always appreciate your input.
Like previous submitter, I'll be interested to see the explanation for that massive difference in the amounts that we're paying. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for that, John. All right. Councillors, and just following up on the question that was asked of Deputy Mayor Angela O'Leary when she presented the Hamilton City Council submission. The question was asked about the support for their submission at their meeting, and Deputy Mayor has sent through the minutes of that meeting, and that submission was unanimously supported by all councillors at Hamilton City Council. So just so everybody is aware of that. All right, Mr. Chief Executive, would you like to give us your submission?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes.
Could I just clarify in terms?
Yes. Yes.
In terms of our debating or discussing or questioning this particular submission, what's the rules around that at this time?
How does that go?
I think similar to elsewhere, questions of clarification.
Clarification.
There's an opportunity probably tomorrow during deliberations to have more discussion, and I have put out a pre-meeting discussion on a few other matters that you might like to be aware of when considering the matters that you're going to hear tomorrow as well. So, Madam Chair, just ask Janine to present the submission on my behalf.
Very good. Do we only give you 10 minutes as well?
10 minutes is plenty, thank you. I'll try and speak really slowly. Yes. So
you're speaking to the
so I'm speaking to
the CE submission on page 45 of our agenda.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. Yes, so the CE submission, I guess, presents an opportunity for staff to request changes to the draft budget that you had approved back in February, just as new matters emerge. The report has been presented to show, I guess, those matters that staff have identified and the impact of those, which pleasingly is a reduction in the total rates revenue required of 678,000, so bringing the increase in rates revenue from current ratepayers down to 5.4%. But against that, also noting a couple of matters in response to council's own processes that, should you proceed with those, would require funding, but within that overall envelope that's been created. So in summary, the key matters covered in the submission, if I just run over those very quickly. There's a couple of proposals in here around the bringing in-house of services that have previously been contracted out, specifically in relation to plant pest officer roles. So the remaining 4 plant pest officers that we contract out, propose that they will be brought onto staff, and in doing so that achieves a saving of about 417,000. Additionally, monitoring around whangamarino is currently contracted out. It's proposed that that work is brought in-house, and doing so also saves 147,000. We've taken a look at the performance of the primary industry compliance program and have noted that because of delays in that program, there is an accumulation of targeted rate revenue within a reserve, and so propose to release some of that funding, $190,000 next year, to help alleviate those rates, but doing it in a manner that doesn't create any future rating shocks for ratepayers either. Staff were in the process of, or are in the process of, developing a business case to support the continuation of the Te Huia service. Additional funding is flagged within the submission in relation to that, both in terms of increasing costs for the preparation of that business case, as well as a reduction in forecast subsidy from NZTA. And we also note in there the bringing forward of the national ticketing system by a year. Finally, from a staff perspective, just to note that the proposed infrastructure capital program for 25-26 has been revised down. So while the total spend over the first 3 years of the LTP is the same, the program for next year will be lower than forecast in the LTP, with the 26-27 year likely to be higher. I think that reflects a more doable program of works. In relation to the council requested or driven changes, we note in there there's currently a draft CE KPI in relation to the development of an energy strategy. Staff believe that some external support or expertise will be required to deliver that, and so we've noted $150,000 in relation to that matter. And then the other point was in relation to resolution from Council in February for staff to report back on the establishment of a research and development fund or funding approach in relation to flood protection and drainage activities. So there's a proposal in here as to how we think that could work. Effectively, the setting aside of $250,000 per annum of general rates funding into an R&D opportunities fund, to create a fund of up to $1 million that could be utilised for research and development. Now, part of the benefit of it being general rates funded is that it wouldn't actually need to be restricted necessarily to flood protection and drainage. So if there's other opportunities that present themselves across council's business, that fund would be could be utilised for that. We note that the genesis of that whole conversation was in relation to a particular piece of technology, a water siphon, that should council wish to proceed with that particular initiative further, the $250,000 annual operating contribution wouldn't be sufficient to meet council's contribution. So any additional funding over and above that would need to be sourced, and it's suggested that council's prior year surplus may be a source for that additional funding, noting that Kānoa has also been approached in terms of some match funding. So we would be leveraging central government funding as well. Madam Chair, that's probably a quick run through. I'm happy to take any points of clarification from councillors.
Councillor Nebon.
No, thanks, Janine. Just a clarification, please, on the R&D fund. All good with that, but I don't recall, other than an official briefing one morning on the water siphon thing, any sort of direction being given on that, or have I missed something? Yeah.
Was discussed in the annual draft annual plan meeting, and a request for staff to come back through this process with an option for how that might be funded.
Yeah, it was more about, I mean, I didn't get to that water siphon unofficial briefing thing, but I would have thought it once the fund's established, there'll be a bit of a process to identify which projects sort of made the cut and which didn't. Yeah, if that made sense, but I might have missed something, but apologies if I have. Yeah.
Just through, Madam Chair. That's correct, but some things have run ahead, including an opportunity that could exist for Kānoa funding, which has meant we've had to move to put that in while we have this other wider discussion. And look, this is one of the matters I would quite like to discuss tomorrow.
Mr. Clarkson.
Yeah, my question really is around on the same lines, in the sense that I've been involved in many a research and development fund, and I know what happens if the specifications and conceptual framework is not in place before one starts. And I can't see what I would consider to be something of that standard in this paper. And I'm asking the question about what other aspects of a business case development would occur, and you may be answering that question tomorrow morning. And also, I'm assuming that if a bid has been made to Kānoa, then there may be some elements of that would give us some comfort that we were heading in the right direction. So I would be, wanting to see the bid that's gone to Kānoa to see whether that has a research and development framework of sufficient quality before I would be prepared to vote on an issue like this. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think the former comment that you made around, is there a framework of research and development? I'm not sure that we have that level, but I think in terms of what was put forward to Kānoa, we'll get that for you tomorrow morning.
Councillor Nicol.
Thanks. Yeah, tomorrow morning when we talk about that, if you could touch on whether any other regional councils are playing in that space, or whether the regional sector in a partnered approach to sharing the risk has been thought about. But my questions actually, one is around the national ticketing system. I just recall from the Public Transport Subcommittee on Friday, there was some discussion about how there was a delay in the ticketing system, but then I'm reading here that it's been brought forward. Just want to understand which way around it is, really.
I got a red light over there. I can't tell.
I have now.
I've got a speaking order, so go ahead, Phil.
I think it's fair to say, as I said last Friday, that the programme reset that's being led by the National Governance Group is still underway. We were aware that most of our funding, if not all of our funding, was in that 26-27 financial year. Just a few months ago, we were likely to have it in place within the next 6 months for this region. The thing's swinging around all over the place. The reality is, at the moment, all of our money is in the 26-27 year. We need to have some funds next financial year in order to be working hard to deliver the product, whether it's launched, within the next 12 months or shortly after. At the moment, we're constrained because there's very little money next year available as things stand. So moving that money into next year allows us to keep going, whether the launch date ends up being before June 2026 or shortly after.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last one was, I'm fully aware there are some councillors who really like to squeeze the FTEs in this organisation, but you've brought us in paragraphs 9 to 12 some significant reduction by bringing things in-house. Just keen to understand whether we could have a conversation about that in detail at some stage around the opportunities going both ways. Because if we can find 417,000 here and 147,000 there, in that way, I'd like us as a council to have a good understanding of whether going one way or the other on this actually saves us more money. So it's more of a direction to consider for future rather than a question. Thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor Mahuta, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, and Councillor Smith. Councillor Mahuta.
Just to continue on the questions around Para 30 Research and Development Fund. I think we've gone to the fund without agreeing to the knowledge strategy of council. Gone to how to fund the knowledge strategy rather than consider what needs to be in it. And I'm saying that after a season of playing in the Rivers Institute with the university. So we went from in-house science to disbanding that to trying to buy science from the thinking community, the NIWA, the university, to we're going to do something again. And I just want to be really clear that whatever we do, does it within the infrastructure that exists within our region. It's our knowledge gain. It's done with everybody else mapped in, like River Authority, whomever else needs this information. And that we are set up really well with the new institutes of bioeconomy and science and the new Institute for Earth Science and Public Health and Science. So again, want to do it, want to understand why we're doing it this way and why it's key and integral right now. So that's that one. And then, yeah, with you, Jen, I want to unpack why the Environmental Monitoring Officer is the next thing we do in Whangamarino. Just want to understand why that's key and being recommended right now. Because having more information has only increased the workload around Whangamarino and the planning workload, but it hasn't caused any new actions. So again, that's towards tomorrow's discussion, not required. Yeah.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
I've got 4 questions. Firstly, bringing in the biodiversity and the Unimuro staff in the house is saving $500,000. Where else can we bring staff in the house? I mean, that's at a huge amount of money. Well, precisely, but why have we been overpaying for so long is a question. So, yep. Question number 2, regional transport connections. I'm concerned that the business case for Te Huia has gone from 200,000 to 450,000 cost and wanted to know why.
So the creation of a business case at all is something that the agency has only recently advised us is required, and it's now formed part of the package of deliverables we have to achieve in order to get into the room for a conversation about the future of the train. We had rightly worked on the assumption that the agency would therefore pay a portion of the costs of that. Over the last couple of months, following the creation of the annual plan consultation draft, they've now been very clear that at this point they are not prepared to fund any of those costs. So in order to achieve the requirements of the agency's decision-making process, we've put to you that we think we need to fund that work in order for it to achieve the requirements of the future decision. Now, there's always a chance that they could come to the party later on, in which case those costs would not be incurred. But we felt the only opportunity was to use the CE submission to bring that to you now for conversation.
2 points on that. One is it was indicated that staff are doing this report, so are there contractors doing it? Question. And the business case from NZTA was going to provide 140,000. So why is it not 340,000? Why is it 450?
The work that we were looking to do in-house was not this business case. This business case could cost us up to $1 million probably. We increased the local share cost up to 450 on the assumption or the basis that that would allow us to get most of the work, well, a good chunk of the work done in-house, but then bring in specialists where required to do pieces of the work. So there is a detailed demand forecasting model that we need to bring in that will help us understand where growth along the service route could occur, for example. Now, these are all
So it just butting in, because I mean, obviously, right now we're councillors. We're just sort of giving some questions that we want further clarification on, and some of these questions may take a little bit more to bring together a fulsome response. So I want staff to feel free to say, actually, we'll bring additional detail tomorrow. I do think that this is a useful process, though, so that we're giving staff a heads up on what we want to dive a little deeper into tomorrow. But I don't want people answering questions without all the facts in front of them in order to do so.
I understand. It's just my worry is you just said $1 million, not 450,000. So, but we can move on.
We could spend a lot more than that, but we won't. We'll bring you some information on that tomorrow.
I notice in 21, the national ticketing system is going to cost 1.29 million, and we're planning to use council's share of the reserves with no impact on rates. But that's for this year. What about subsequent years? But we won't have necessary council share. Is that going to increase rates?
I don't think that statement is specific to that year. This is the establishment of the system rather than the running of a system once it's in place.
Right.
So this is about establishing the transition to national ticketing. So these are one-off costs.
So it would be a one-off cost. And finally, in terms of the Research and Development Opportunities Fund, given there's some queries about whether it is a fund, it's got a fund process, and it's specifically in the first instance looking at water siphon technology, has anyone looked at whether it could come from targeted rates from the people who would benefit from that rather than a general rate and a specific project rather than a fund?
Through the chair, can we come back on that tomorrow? That has been considered,
right.
And the complexity of it being a trial with potentially, if it's successful, regional benefit to come from it, that the targeted ratepayers shouldn't be funding on their own. So we can come back with some commentary on that.
Great. Obviously, there's a fair few questions around that, so we'll spend some time on this particular item tomorrow. Oh, Councillor Smith, and then Councillor.
I'm okay with being a what.
Oh.
Thinking on the fly. It's all good.
Okay. Thank you. If I can go to regional transport connections and build on what's already been asked. So I accept that there was a long-term plan discussion which was consulted on. So we've had an explanation why it's gone from 200 to 450 to $1 million and now $1 million plus. So whose decision has it been to fund the 150 from carrying it over from 2024-25, and is that from non-surplus amounts or from some particular budget? So that's one question. NZTA have said that they won't fund the business case. Reading between the lines, I think that's a clear steer about their future position, sadly. But have we got a mandate to spend this money without asking the community if it wants to spend this amount of money? We told them it was going to be $200,000, from $200,000, and within 18 months, we're talking more than $1 million. That to me is either been a misleading of council or a complete and utter, I'm not sure that I want to say it, but the reality is, how can it be so wrong 18 months later, even if you allow for the 140,000 that you budgeted on coming from NZTA? So this Te Huia is fraught with problems, and I know there's issues around the ideology from one particular national party. I'll say it, the Greens have thrown a spanner in there about Te Huia and the future of it. So my concern is getting further into this business case and asking the community to spend more than $1 million on something that is not certain. So where's the mandate to use additional rates, which says the 140, which will need to be funded through rates? Where's the mandate? Because we had the LTP discussion around a figure.
Can I just get some clarification on the $1 million? Because now all of a sudden we're talking about $1 million. Nowhere in this paper does it say $1 million. And I just want to get, before we get too hung up on that number, I want some clarity.
That's the director's own words, Madam Chair.
I understand. So I'm just asking for some clarity from the director around that.
So the numbers in this report are the numbers for the decision making. My reference was that there are other regions who are spending $1.5 to $3 million on business cases, and they are funded in part by NZTA. We're in a position here where late in the piece we've been told that we are required to do this business case work, which was not in our plan, and at the same time the agency is not prepared to fund 50% of it, which is what's led to the increase in cost.
Just in response to that, Madam Chair, can I ask for clarification? Is any other region funding a train service? An additional train service? The business case is there. So you've got Te Huia, which is a trial. The others, like the Manawatu service and others, are they introducing new services for any business cases?
The business cases I'm referring to relate to public transport services and infrastructure in a general sense.
I think Te Huia is a little bit different, and that's why it's been.
Oh, so some of those would be rail related, yes? Or no?
There are. Wellington spent millions in order to attract the Lower North Island rolling stock and rail network improvements funding, and that was all business case related. That would have been multiple millions of dollars. The ones I was referring to.
That's not what we're proposing.
No.
We are not proposing spending $1 million on this.
No, the numbers in the report.
So just so we are all clear, that is not what the proposal is. Before that starts to grow legs. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
But back to the figures that are in front of us.
Definitely.
Yes.
It was an example.
Madam Chair, if I could just confirm, the CE submission is as it stands in front of you. So
can I ask then, now that that's been clarified, the comment in the ending paragraph 20, the $140, which will also need to be funded through rates, is that new money? Because I think the end of the report says this is all cost neutral anyway, or slightly less.
Yes. So through the chair, yes, that is. But with the savings that have been achieved in other parts and other changes that are proposed, there's funding available to meet that additional cost.
Well, thank you for that clarity. I just wonder whether we are being naive, because I think the maybe this is for the deliberations, but we're being I think we've been sent a signal.
But the additional cost that is being requested through the CE submission is the $140,000. Is that correct?
No.
Plus the increase in.
Is the
250 plus 100.
240.
No,
it's
I want to,
it's
let's
three
be
months.
clear. What is the additional cost that's being asked is what?
So through the chair, there's 100,000 of costs. So there's an additional 250,000 of expenditure, which is assumed of 150 of that will be funded through savings in the current financial year. So there's 100. And then there's also the reduction in NZTA funding of 140. So there's $240,000 of additional rates funding that's being requested through that change.
240,000. And those are general rates?
That will be general rate funded.
General rate. Did you want to answer?
Just to be clear, in the submission, there aren't hidden costs. We're being very upfront and putting it on the table of what a need is. And the signal from council has never been to not pursue a business case for the future of Te Hui. It's always been the expectation. And that is what the cost of it would be. And I think that what we're suggesting is we could do a full-blown version, or we could do a good version with the trimmed-down costs. And I think that's the proposal that's in front of you.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Nicol.
Oh, you've got a.
I was just going to, sorry,
Sorry.
for you, Madam
Yes.
Chair, just one more comment in terms of the agency's reticence. I don't think that the writing is on any wall, to be honest. The reasons that they have given are that their entire programme is locked up in the RONS funding decisions that are being made by the board in June and July. So they have been doing work for 6 months, creating a package of bids that will go into their total funding pot for the allocation of money to take forward this Roads of National Significance programme nationally. As a result, there's been virtually no release of any money for anything anywhere else in all of that time, while they've been trying to understand exactly what they will require. We will get clarity in exactly what headroom is available after the board have made those decisions. But for the annual plan process, these decisions need to be made now. There is no guarantee of any funding. So we need, again, to be transparent with you. And this is what the dollars are in this report.
Jen.
Thank you. My question was for Janine around the corporate section under 17B, talking about a new population growth reserve fund. I was just because I remember somewhat the SIPO review at the start of the training, but can you explain to me what the difference will be of having a new reserve fund versus just going into the equalisation reserve, which was, I thought, trying to do the same type of thing? I just want to understand it well.
Yeah. So through the chair, the equalisation reserve serves to manage the ups and downs of the investment fund return. So where you have a good year, pop some money in. When you have a bad year, water, you take the money out of that. So that funding sort of provides that ballast in terms of balancing those returns out. What the population growth reserve will do is ensure that in addition to inflation proofing the fund, the value of the fund will also increase with growth in the population that it's supporting, so that the return that's available today is truly equal to what would be available in the future. At the moment, we inflation proof, but on a per capita basis, you could say that the return is actually decreasing.
Thank you.
What it will do is it does slow down the members of the Finance and Services Committee will know from time to time we've ended up with a deficit in that equalisation reserve. By providing for growth, it will slow down any recovery of that, noting that that had been going pretty well probably up until the March quarter, and should be back on track, I would hope, with April results anyway.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Chris.
Madam Chair.
Light.
Microphone.
Sorry.
Janine, just for point of clarification, I want to make sure everybody understands. Business case that we're talking about for submission to NZTA is going to be 450,000. You've found some clever ways to fund that, but it's at the end of the day, it's going to cost ratepayers 450,000. Is that right or wrong?
Yep, I'm getting nods from my left.
Maybe I just clarify? Is it a suite of business cases, or is it one business case, Phil?
We reported to the PT subcommittee last Friday that there are 3 key tasks we have to complete in order to be in the room for a conversation about Te Huia. One is a 5-year review document, which sums up the delivery of all of the KPIs and measures over the last 5 years, and it's an extension of the 2-year review document that we did some time ago. The second is short term. What are the options for the continuation of the service? And that's 3 options: is a status quo, running peak services into Strand and then having all other services terminating at Pukekohe, or having all services terminating at Pukekohe. So that's a business case in its own right. Then there is the long-term future of the service, which is what we're talking about here, which is what are the options for purchasing rolling stock, and should we be going into some kind of special vehicle with government to own and fund those? What are the commercial operational ideas around whether Auckland Transport should take over the delivery of this service in the long term? How would that happen? From an economic assessment perspective, there's a load of demand forecasting required that will give us some future growth models around the value of building stations in Pokeno, Tuakau. There's a range of detailed work that effectively is the 5 parts of a full business case. And what we're talking about here is that last one, really. We've got a lot of work to do between now and December, and then between December and April next year. That effectively all comes to annual plan decision making around willingness to pay from this community, as well as trying to get contributions from others. We've got 2 business cases and a 5-year review to write and submit. There's just a lot of work to do.
Madam Chair, I'm trying to establish what it's going to cost us to provide a business case to NZTA to justify the continuation of Te Huia past June 2026. That's all I'm asking for. Secondly, we're told that we're going to have to buy, we've seen in our long-term plan that we're going to have to commit $100 million or whatever it is to long-term replacement rolling stock. How much is that going to cost? That'll be another, if I'm hearing Phil correctly, that'll be millions of dollars. Like, we're kidding ourselves. This is a serious amount of money being put into business cases for something which may not even exist after June next year. So I'm really concerned about spending this amount of money on ratepayers' money.
So we're not to deliberations yet.
I know, but I'm just trying to make councillors understand what they're talking about.
But if you've got if you've got specific numbers, questions, detail that you need before we enter into deliberations tomorrow, now is the time to put that on the table so that we can bring it back.
So 450,000.
So we'll get for tomorrow a clearer breakdown. So councillors can. Ben.
Yeah. So firstly, you've talked about 3 business cases. Are any of them going to be done by consultants, or are they going to be done internally?
Sorry, I just need Noel, can I get
something? It's a question for tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Okay, that's fine. And just to clarify, and here again, the point of the 450, it's just slightly confusing. So between 200,000 to 450,000 is obviously 250,000. 150 will be funded by carryover. The remainder will need to be funded via general rate, so there's $100,000. In addition, NZTA have confirmed they will not fund the business case, which means 140,000 will also need to be funded through rates. That's the also question in there. Makes it
So-
seem like there's 140 on top of that.
So through the chair, that is, I think, what I had clarified before, that there's an additional $100,000 of expenditure, and then there is $140,000 of recovery from NZTA that we had assumed that they will now not contribute. So the ask or the impact of this is $240,000.
But there's already assumed 150,000 of funding we carried over.
Correct, and the question has been asked by, I think, Councillor Smith in terms of the approval process for that. So we'll come back on that.
Right, so there's 240,000 plus 100
Assumed to be carried over. Yep.
carried over. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I'm just asking for some simple tabular arrangements of the data that we are trying to understand at the moment in a sequential order, so we can actually, the problem at the moment is we have a narrative which sort of flicks from one point to another. And when you come to it, you know, as we have, it's just a little hard to follow. So let's just get it down on some simple tables and get it sorted, and we'll be fine tomorrow to work our way through it. Yep.
All right. Any other points of clarification or questions? Or anything that anybody needs to see tomorrow to inform their decision-making process? Nope. Banana cake?
I guess I'll just flag that on the Wharekaua Coast one, looking at the report, there was a decent analysis on an option 1A and 1B, but there was no analysis on 2. And I'm mindful that the Hauraki District Council one has thrown a bit of a spanner in, which caused A and B to be created. Just tomorrow, if we could have a bit of detail on what happens if people prefer 2, because I didn't find that in the paper. To the extent I might need to know. So just a flag. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Oh, Councillor Cookson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just, with the business case for Kanoa, it's a pilot, not a trial. I think that's important. It was a pilot.
I think we'll be getting further detail.
Yeah, I hope that wording's used tomorrow instead of trial.
All right. With that, councillors, thank you very much for your attendance today. I appreciate it. And so we will adjourn the meeting at 3:06, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning. At what time are we reconvening tomorrow morning?
9 a.m. for a meeting with myself, I think.
9 a.m. Well, the council meeting will reconvene at 9:30, and we'll have just briefings before that. Kia ora. Thanks, everyone.
you.